Al Jazeera podcasts.
Today, Canada's explosive allegations against India reach new heights.
The Indian government made a horrific mistake.
As Canada accuses India of killing dissidents on its soil, we hear from one community caught in the middle. I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. It's a story that starts on a June evening last year in a quiet suburb of Vancouver. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was leaving his Sikh temple. He had just finished prayers. As he was leaving the parking lot, another car suddenly pulled up.
Two men from close by, from a closed waiting area, according to witnesses, run up to Nijjar's car and start firing at the driver, at Nijjar, who was driving.
Police said he died on the spot. The death of a Canadian Sikh leader outside his temple sent shockwaves through Nijjar's community. But it wasn't entirely unexpected.
Police say he appears to have been targeted. Temple officials say Nijjar had received threats because of his support for a separate Sikh state in India.
Nijjar was an outspoken supporter of the Khalistan movement, which seeks to create a separate Sikh state. The movement is outlawed in India, where he was labeled a terrorist. But for months, people in the Sikh community were the only ones who believed the Indian government was behind the killing. Then, last September, came a stunning moment in Canadian Parliament from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
India immediately rejected the accusation.
New Delhi rejected Ottawa's claims as absurd and motivated.
And from there, the diplomatic relationship between Canada and India quickly started falling apart.
Diplomats were expelled from both countries, and Canada called off trade talks.
This May, 11 months after Nijjar's death, federal police announced a breakthrough.
I'm here today to announce that we arrested and charged 3 individuals for first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder in relation to Hardeep Nijjar's homicide.
And that brings us to this October.
Canada expelled 6 Indian diplomats on Monday and linked them to the murder of a Sikh separatist leader on Canadian soil. India, in turn, ordered the expulsion of 6 Canadian diplomats.
The Royal Canadian Mounted Police were now alleging a broader campaign to target Indian dissidents in Canada. Trudeau spoke about the new allegations in a press conference.
It is obvious that the government of India made a fundamental error in thinking that they could engage in supporting criminal activity against Canadians here on Canadian soil.
Caught in the middle of this escalating fight between the two countries are Sikh Canadians, like my guest, who's been following the details of this story from the beginning.
India has been caught red-handed trying to undermine and destabilize Canada, but not only that, to foster discord and polarization against the Sikh Canadian community. My name is Jaskaran Sandhu from Brampton, Canada. I am the National Director of Government Relations with the World Sikh Organization of Canada and the co-founder of Boz News, which is a digital outlet serving the Sikh and Punjabi diaspora.
Jaskaran, welcome to The Take. It is good to have you here. I wish the topic were better, though. So let's start with the explosive latest news, and that is that Canada has expelled 6 diplomats, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said in a press conference that agents of the Indian government have been involved in criminal activities, gathering info, coercing, and threatening South Asian Canadians. What did you think when you heard this news?
For the last 4 decades, we Sikhs in Canada and other parts of the Western world have been very vocal about how Indian transnational repression is occurring in this country. And to have the RCMP, Canada's national police force, our prime minister, and members of his cabinet come out and say in clear, unequivocal terms that India is behind this type of violence out here was, quite frankly, vindicating. We've been speaking about this for a very long time, and there's been moments where many of us felt like we're being gaslight. Our feelings and our lived experience weren't real, and to have this come out in such a public way, in such an official manner, really goes a long way for the community to feel that finally this is being taken seriously.
A public way, an official manner. And not only that, this is implicating Indian officials at some of the highest levels. You said that a lot of this felt vindicating for the Sikh community, but was any of it a surprise?
I think what we heard that is new from the RCMP press conference that was held this past Monday was the clear admission from the RCMP that they have evidence talking about the use of organized crime being orchestrated by the Indian government, and to your point, going to the highest level of the Indian government. And not only that, we've now heard officially that Indian consulates and Indian diplomats are engaged in espionage and intelligence gathering and targeting of the Sikh Canadian diaspora. To the point, and this again, surprising to hear this out loud, is the coercion and threatening of Canadians to become informants for India. What I think is surprising for the Sikh community is not that the fact that this is happening. What's surprising is to have it come out so cleanly, without any ambiguity on what's actually going on.
So the Canadian government has said that India has refused to cooperate with this investigation. And India has rejected the allegations, saying the Canadian government has presented no evidence.
So far, Canada has not given any evidence in support of the very serious allegations that they've leveled against India and against Indian diplomats. We also see there is a pattern. The pattern is motivated by political considerations on the part of the Canadian government. There is also, as we have said, there's a clear pattern to smear India.
Many people in the Sikh community, I can tell just looking at your face and the reaction that sparked, are convinced the Indian government was involved. Why is that?
Look, it's a big deal for the Prime Minister to stand up in Parliament to make the statement he did back in September. And the RCMP has finally come out and said they have evidence. They have evidence of what they shared. And one of the reasons why the RCMP came out the way it did, and they're very clear at the onset of their press conference to share that this is not usual business. This is not how the RCMP does its investigation. They don't necessarily come out and publicly give updates amidst ongoing investigations. But the issue right now is that there's an ongoing security threat to Canadians, and we have to put it out into public scrutiny to ensure that Canadians remain safe. The other aspect to this is that what's happening in Canada is not unique to Canada. We've seen in our neighbors to the south, the United States, that they have now indictments against 2 Indian nationals for engaging in a very similar assassination and transnational repression program in America.
New tonight now, an Indian government employee is wanted on federal charges for allegedly plotting to kill a U.S. citizen here in New York.
Vikas Yadav is charged with conspiracy to commit murder for hire and money laundering. He's the second Indian national after Nikhil Gupta to be charged in the alleged plot to kill Gurpatwant Singh Pannu.
But it also involved a government employee, an Indian government employee sitting in India, working with Indian intelligence, RAW, RAW, which is under the direct supervision of the Prime Minister's office, Narendra Modi and Amit Shah, who was directing this. And what we've seen in the indictments released by America is that the assassination program that was being unleashed in America is directly connected with the assassination program that was being executed in Canada. And that's cold, hard evidence that's now in front of the courts. Now, the upside for America, which, the great thing about the American investigation is the Indian government and organized crime nexus accidentally hired a U.S. agent to conduct the hit. And so they were caught red-handed, and America had ample time to gather all the evidence they needed to bring forward court proceedings. And we've heard the Americans say this week, as well as our allies in the UK and other Five Eye partners, that they expect India to take part in all investigations, and they haven't done so yet. And that's come to a great disappointment to Western democracies looking at India and asking, what are you guys doing?
Jaskaran, you talk of an assassination program. So I want you to take me back to June of last year when the news that Hardeep Singh Nijjar was assassinated. This killing happened in a parking lot of a Sikh temple. What was going through the minds of people, including your own, at that time?
When the assassination happened, the Sikh community immediately said that it was India behind the assassination. And one of the reasons for that is because the Sikh community knew that Hardeep Singh Nijjar was a targeted man by India. Hardeep Singh Nijjar, for those that don't know, was a well-known Sikh leader in Canada. He was the president of a large Gurdwara, a Sikh place of worship, in the city of Sarí. And Sarí is just outside of Vancouver, and it's home to one of the largest concentration of Sikhs and Punjabis outside of Punjab in the world. And he was a man that was active in local Sikh community politics, and he was active in raising grievances with the Indian state.
We should be ready. This is a fight of the pen, not of weapons. We are not saying to anyone to pick up weapons. We are saying, pick up the pen.
And closer to the time of his death, he was a major organizer of the Khalistan referendum in the city of Sarí. And the Khalistan referendum is an ongoing, non-binding vote being held within the Sikh diaspora. And this activism that he was known for put a major target on Hardeep Singh Nijjar's back. And he was also the target of vast disinformation, some of it just absolutely bonkers. One claim that India was pushing and trying to go after Mr. Nijjar was that he was organizing a terrorist training camp in a forest in British Columbia, which is obviously incredibly false. RCMP came out at the time to claim, to share that it was not true. The mayor of the local city where India was claiming this training camp is being organized said there's no such thing here. So we knew that he was a target. And he also knew that he was a target. He was on local Punjabi radio in Canada talking about how he was told by Canadian intelligence officials, including CSIS and RCMP, that there was a hit on him. So then when he finally was killed in the parking lot of a Gurdwara, he was literally killed in a parking lot of a Sikh place of worship. It was very clear to us who was behind this, and that was the Indian government.
More with Jaskaran after the break. So, Jaskaran, on Indian TV and in Indian news headlines that have been shared widely, you can find them online, there is a lot of support for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's handling of this and a lot of backlash against Canada and Justin Trudeau.
You've got Khalistani extremists who are being patronized under the name of freedom of speech, and therefore if India stands up for what it believes its national interests, why is the US in a tizzy? Why is Canada in a tizzy?
Today all Canadians must be so ashamed that they are led by a liar, a certified liar, called Justin Trudeau, who went on record before his country's Foreign Interference Committee last night and admitted that he has absolutely no hard evidence to prove that the Indian government ordered Khalistani terrorist Nijjar's killing.
And among some Modi supporters, there is this fear that Trudeau has been turning a blind eye to the Khalistani movement, the movement for a separate Sikh state in Canada, and allowing it to foster there in Canada, much to their chagrin in India. They would probably point to past grievances, instances of violence within the Khalistani movement, like the Air India bombing, which killed 329 people, the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in the 1980s. But how active is this movement now, and what does it actually look like?
I want to tackle the first part of your question when you talk about Indian news and Indian media. Now, it's well known that India is a rapidly autocratizing country. And part of what's happening in India is the collapse of democratic institutions, including the institution of free press. And one of the biggest issues with media in India is how they are beholden to government interest. And we also know from various investigations into disinformation networks out of India, including by the EU Disinfo Lab, that media plays a big role in propagating disinformation and misinformation targeting the Sikh community. And so this is the environment in which these news headings and clippings and talk shows are happening. Now, as far as your second part of the question concerning India's grievances with Khalistan activism, when India comes and says, well, you have to clamp down on quote unquote Khalistani extremism, and I'll get to that point in a little more depth later. Canada always turns around and says, look, if you have evidence of some form of extremism, we are a country of the rule of law. We will investigate it. India has never been able to provide any proof. What India actually has a problem with is political free speech. They have a problem with a non-binding democratic referendum. That is what Hardeep Singh Nijjar was killed for. That is what India has declared as terrorist activity. And Canada has very, very clearly said in response to these allegations, one, protected free speech are a charter right here. This is not something that we will clamp down on because you don't like what they're saying. And the Americans have said the same thing. Mm-hmm. What's the state of democracy in India where, free expression, self-determination, and, the right to advocate for self-determination is an internationally recognized right, is somehow a criminal activity. Now, back in the 80s and 90s, there was a militancy. 100% there was. But that, the Sikh community would argue, and I would argue, was one of self-defense. It came after the Indian government invaded and attempted to destroy the Darbar Sahib complex, the Golden Temple, the center of our faith, one of the most important sites in the Sikh world. When India deals with Sikhs who try to speak about their rights and their history, they deal with it in a draconian manner, right? They throw people in jail without any charges and hold them indefinitely. They engage in extrajudicial killing. They engage in disappearances. They engage in the undermining of Sikh institutions. And what you're seeing now in the West, in countries like the United States and America, is India exporting this type of draconian, autocratic behavior to the Western world, to the diaspora.
Well, Jaskaran, we've been talking big picture, and I want to narrow in on you and your immediate community, because I wonder what kind of impact all of this, from the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar to what's going on now, this diplomatic row between Canada and India, what impact that has all had on your community.
The Sikh community, in a large part that is here in the diaspora, fled the Sikh genocide of 1984. It fled violence, this type of extrajudicial violence that we have now saw in Canada and the United States. And there is a feeling that, are we safe and secure in Canada as well? And one of the reassuring factors is that with the indictments in the United States and with the announcements we've seen in Canada, that our governments are taking this seriously. And that's very reassuring. For Sikh activists that have been speaking on these topics for the last 4 decades, they always knew that it would make them a target for the Indian government. We knew that it's likely that we wouldn't be able to visit our homeland because of it, but we did it anyways because it's the right thing to do. So I don't want to say that, this somehow strikes fear in our heart, because it doesn't. I think the Sikh community is very courageous and brave and will continue, irrespective of the crazy details that keep emerging about the extent India is willing to go to silence us. I think it's been, to my earlier point, vindicating, but it's also done an amazing job in galvanizing our community, coast to coast. It's brought our Sikh diaspora closer together because we know what is at stake, and it's our life and our liberty. But that's something that we're willing to risk to ensure that truth and justice prevail.
And that's The Take. If you want more conversations like these, don't forget to give it a like so people can find this episode. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what stood out to you, or if there's anything you'd like us to dive deeper into next time. I'm always checking in, so let's keep the conversation going. See you tomorrow.